We live and direct, baby. You feel me? We up in there. What's happening? What's happening? Hey, welcome back to Football is Money. I'm your host, they call me Boss. And on this episode of Football is Money, we're going to dive into the Cowboys Corner. And before we talk about quarterbacks, teams, or championships, we need to talk about something bigger than all that. And that's the story. Because in the NFL, the way players and teams are talked about, it doesn't just shape opinions. It shapes fantasy decisions. It shapes betting behavior. And it shapes how the public assigns value. And once the public starts moving a certain way, the market reacts. You'll see lines move. You'll see totals move. Player value shifts. And pretty much that's how it works. So, I'm not going to call this a Dak and the Cowboys defense show, like defending them boys, even though that is my squad. I call this here a standards episode because the way quarterbacks and franchises are framed directly affect how people draft during fantasy season. It affects how people bet and how people lose money chasing stories instead of chasing structure. Every year, the same benchmarks come up. People want to talk about playoff wins or how many Super Bowls such and such got. Never the whole team, right? It only when it suits the argument. They talk about legacy and everything. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable, but here's the baseline. If those are the standards, then they have to be applied the same way across all players, across all teams, all the time, right? And this is where things start to separate. Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys have become the default, you understand me? The default point of reference in the NFL. Good or bad. They the comparison when a young quarterback breaks through early because that was Dak, right? And they also the example of when a season falls short. So now, here's the question that actually matter. If that's the standard, why doesn't it stay in place regardless of who's talking or who they're talking about? The expectations move with it. And when the expectations change, people draft differently during fantasy season, people bet differently, and the market follows all of that noise. And that's what we're breaking down today. I'm talking about quarterbacks, teams, contracts, championship rings, all of that. Not to argue fandom, but to expose how conversation turns into costly decisions. Because if football is money, that's what we're about. You dig? Again, I'm your host, they call me Boss. This is Football is Money, and let the show begin.
Motion left to right, there's nothing there. Now he tries to run, breaks a tackle, dives for the end zone, fumbled the football, left sideline, midfield, 40, 30, 20, 10, touchdown!
Yeah, there we go.
Throws back of the end zone. There's C.D. Lamb.
Unbelievable!
We're back. You're listening to Football is Money on footballismoney.com. Here's your host. They call me Boss.
All right. So now we got the standard set. We need a baseline. And The baseline for this conversation is Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Not because they're the worst team, not because they're the best team, but because they're the reference point that everybody already uses. So whether they admit it or not, all right, so let's strip this down to the facts and the facts only. No tone, no defense, no excuses. I'm not defending them, even though they is my team. I'm using them as an example. Just like you like to do, right? All right, so Dak been in the league for over 10 years? This would be his 11th season. And over that span, the Cowboys have consistently reached the postseason. They've won divisions multiple times. They've hosted playoff games. We even retired the GOAT. I digress. Say that for another episode. But the playoff outcomes are clear, though. Limited advancement. 2 postseason wins under Dak reign, no conference championship appearance, and their resume has produced a very specific label in the public conversation. Good quarterback, but not elite. Can't get it done when it matters the most. And I hear you. I'm with you. Whether you agree with that label or not is irrelevant for this exercise. All right. So this is the baseline. This is the resume people point to when they say that's not enough. This is the profile used to dismiss quarterbacks, to question contracts, to minimize regular season success. And again, we're not arguing all that right now. Not yet anyway. I'm just trying to establish the reference point. All right. Because from this point forward, every quarterback in every franchise we talk about is going to be viewed through this same lens. Time in the league, same expectation, same playoff reality. Right. And once that comparison begins, the inconsistency becomes impossible to ignore. All right, so let's go with the QB comparison. I got a list of them over here. All right, so we got the baseline, but this is where the comparison actually matters. Because once Dak Prescott becomes the reference point, the next question isn't emotional, it's practical. And that question is, who else is operating in the same quarterback market? And what does that actually produce? To answer that, we have to clear up one thing that gets misunderstood every single year, and that's quarterback pay, right? Because these contracts ain't rewards, they not promises, it's market value. This is the cost of entry at this position. If a job pays $25, $30 an hour, you're not going to go, line up to take 18, right? So quarterbacks don't take less out of principle. If anything, they push the number higher because they know the next contract resets the market again. Another thing, once the player take less, that becomes the new expectation for everyone behind him. So when people say, he makes too much money to not have a ring, they already starting from the wrong premise. This is the market, not a guarantee. Now, let's look at the top of the market. Dak Prescott, he do come in at highest paid quarterback in the league, and he deserved that being on the most valuable sports franchise in the world. But we'll keep it moving. Let's look at this list. Next up, after Dak, we got Joe Burrow, right? Joe Burrow. He elite talent. He's respected across the league, but he's missed the postseason back-to-back seasons. I know he was hurt, whatever. Joe B is Joe B, but do we get out of this same type of talk, right? No, we don't. Next up, we got J-Lo, Jordan Love. He's also paid at the top tier. Missed the playoffs this year after a second round exit last year. He only got paid because of who he beat, which was, we'll keep it moving. Next up, Josh Allen, MVP level ability, massive contract, one and done this postseason. And I'm not doing this to talk about any quarterback in the league. I'm just trying to get you to understand. the quarterback market and what comes from that. Next up, Trevor Lawrence. Paid like a franchise cornerstone. Early playoff exit this year. Tua Tagovailoa got top tier money. Limited recent postseason presence. Like, what are we talking about here? JG go off. Jared Goff coming off his best season last year. This year, no playoffs. Brock Purdy just got his massive contract. One and done. Justin Herbert, he got elite tools, got a big contract. He still haven't won a single playoff game. Lamar Jackson, MVP resume, 2 times, top of the market pay, not in the playoffs this year. Now pause right there. All right. This is the highest paid tier at the position. This is the financial ceiling everyone points to. And here's the part that ends the argument if we are being honest. Nobody in this group has a Super Bowl ring. Not one. All right. The quarterback with the most rings in the league right now isn't a part of this tier. So what are we really saying when we connect money directly to championships? Because the evidence is sitting right in front of us. Market pay don't produce rings. It never has. And yet, when Dax get his money, his contract get treated like, his contract comes with a deadline, right? When another quarterback get paid, it's called a market reset. Same position, same money, different interpretation. But this is the separation right here. Dak get judged almost entirely by his outcome. You know, everybody else gets evaluated through trajectory, context, or what might still happen, right? And as long as that difference exists, this conversation is never really about performance. It's about who we are comfortable assigning the weight to and who we aren't, all right? Now, let's zoom out and go to the full team reality check. All right. And to do that, we got to zoom all the way out. You know, I hate to do it, but I got to do it. Right. Because if championships are the ultimate standard, if Super Bowl rings are the ultimate standard, that standard doesn't stop with quarterbacks. It applies to franchises too. And if we're going to be honest about that, we can't talk around the league anymore. We have to name them. So let's start with the teams that have never been to the Super Bowl. All right. And let me see. I got my list right here. I got the Jacksonville Jaguars, never been to the Super Bowl. The Houston Texans, never been to the Super Bowl. The Cleveland Browns, never been to the Super Bowl. The Detroit Lions, never been to the Super Bowl. And here goes some teams that's been but never won. All right, they've been but never won. We got Buffalo, been 4 times, and they went 4 times in a row. Lost all 4 of them back to back to back to back. Is that great? Or is that great at losing? And they last appearance, that was like early 90s. The Cowboys beat them last time they was in the Super Bowl. Let's see. The Minnesota Vikings, 4 Super Bowl appearances, no wins. The Bengals, 3 appearances. The Atlanta Falcons, 2 appearances. The Carolina Panthers, 2 appearances. The Cardinals went 1 time. The Chargers went 1 time. The Titans went to the Super Bowl 1 time. And I know Houston want to claim that one, but you can't, buddy. You can't claim that if you don't claim them. All right? So these different eras, different quarterback, different rebuild plans, same outcome. No rings. No rings, my boy. So again, what are we talking about here, man? Somebody want to explain this to me? Because all these teams be the same people that's talking about my team. They need you to take a chill pill, my boy. Focus on yours, then just maybe you guys can be a little bit better. To even put yourself in the same conversation with a team like the Cowboys. Yeah, I tried to keep it cool, man, but they done got me all riled up out here, right? So now, whoa, hold on. Wait a minute. I got something you might want to hear. Look at here. Everything that we do right here is in one place. Footballismoney.com. The podcast, it's on the website. The YouTube content, full episodes, breakdown, the shorts, everything, it's on footballismoney.com. No bouncing between platforms. No hunting for links, right? If you want picks, footballismoney.com. If you want to learn how to play fantasy football, footballismoney.com. If you want to compete in fantasy leagues with experienced players, footballismoney.com. If you already locked in and you just want confirmation, some tools, and a little structure, footballismoney.com. Energy drinks, podcast resources, spiritual alignment challenges, all at footballismoney.com. And if you want to book footballismoney.com directly, fantasy consultation, betting consultation, mindset, spiritual alignment, or if you just want to talk to yours truly, you can do that too. One platform, one ecosystem, everything. Football is Money is in one place, and that is footballismoney.com. With all that being said, let's move to the next layer. Let's talk about the teams that won Super Bowls but haven't been there in over 10 years, right? And to do that, we gotta widen it. We gotta widen the lens all over again, right? Because there's another group that rarely even get talked about. So let's go. This is where the room fills up at. Again, these are teams that have won Super Bowls but haven't won one in more than a decade. All right. So we got my Cowboys. I'm gonna put them at the top of the list because they lead in this story. Not to say that's the longest drought. All right. So we got my Cowboys, last title, 1995 season. Up next, we got the San Francisco 49ers, last title, 1994. The Green Bay Packers, last title, 2010. The Pittsburgh Steelers, last title, 2008. The New York Giants, 2011 was the last time they hosted the Lombardi Trophy. We have the New Orleans Saints. Last time they saw a trophy, 2009. Let's see. We have the Indianapolis Colts, 2006. Peyton Manning, my guy. All right, so this is where stars get. Well, no, we got the Baltimore Ravens, 2012. Joe Flacco. Was that Joe Flacco? I believe so. Now, here's where the list started getting crazy. Chicago Bears. You guys haven't won the Super Bowl since 1985. I was two. Keep that on the low, though. Let's see. The New York Jets. Y'all ain't won a Super Bowl since 1968. I think Martin Luther King was still alive then. Let's see. The Washington Commanders ain't won a Super Bowl since 1991. You almost a grandmama if you was born in 1991. Oh, snap. Let me see. The Dolphins ain't won a Super Bowl since 1973, my boy. And let's bring it all home. Last one, Las Vegas, Oakland, LA Raiders. Last title was in 1983. That's the year yours truly came into existence. All right. So this ain't a fringe group. You know, that's the majority of the league, man. Different markets, different owners, different expectations, you know, but everybody got the same goal, but everybody have the same drought. Now add the final layer. Now let's look at the last decade of Super Bowl winners.
I'm speechless. When you do it together.
Who actually finished, right? Last 10 years, these are the Super Bowl winners. We got the Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, the New England Patriots. How many times they been on the list? The Los Angeles Rams, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Denver Broncos. That's it. 6 teams, 10 seasons. And if you look closer, you know, some of these names repeat. Kansas City shows up multiple times. New England shows up multiple times. Philadelphia shows up multiple times. So while the league talks about parity, the trophies tell a different story. Championships don't rotate evenly. They concentrate, which means the rest of the league, most of it, is competing in a system where only a few teams actually break through in any given era. It might seem like any year could be any team, but the stats show us otherwise. And that's why treating every drought like a moral failure misses the reality of how this league actually works, right? So it's a small circle of winners. It's a handful of franchises recycling success while everybody else rotates through hope. And here's the part that usually gets skipped. Outside of New England, outside of the Patriots, not one of these teams, not Kansas City, not the Eagles, not the Rams, not Tampa Bay, not Denver. Neither one of these guys has more Super Bowl rings than the Dallas Cowboys. We got 5. And that's tied for second most in NFL history. So while recent championships are concentrated, history hasn't been erased. The Cowboys didn't disappear from relevance. The league just moved into a different winning window. And confusing era dominance with organizational failure is how people lose perspective and start judging teams in isolation instead of in the actual context that's needed. This league has never been evenly distributed. Championships have always been concentrated, man, and yet only one franchise gets treated like its drought is unacceptable by default. Only one team gets measured against the entire league every season, and we all know who that is. It's Dallas. And fans of all of these other teams talk about 30 years like it's a unique experience, while some are standing in droughts of their own. Some longer, some a little bit more hush-hush, some with nothing at all. This is the reality check. If rings are the only thing that matter, then most of the league is failing. And they've been doing that for a long time. So you can't isolate one team. You can't pretend like this is a Cowboys only issue without acknowledging the rest of the room. Everybody's here. It's a lot of us here. It's crowded, right? But let's go into another room where there's only Super Bowl winners. You know, cut out half the league like that. All right. So now let's close this thing out. We're going to talk about the money. So now that everything is on the table, let's be clear about what this really was about. This was never just a conversation about rings, right? It was about how stories turn into decisions. Because when the narrative takes hold in the NFL, and this is probably one of the things I hate the most, you know, it don't just stay on TV, right? It shows up in fantasy leagues. It shows up in your lineup you're putting out every week. It shows up in your betting slips. When a quarterback gets labeled as can't win, people fade them in fantasy. They don't draft them. That's how you'll get a Dak Prescott in round 9, listening to what somebody said on TV. And when a team gets framed as under pressure, people overreact to the spreads. When a franchise get called due or desperate, parlays get built on emotion instead of the math. You understand what I'm saying? And once enough people move the same way, the market adjusts. Vegas don't follow the truth. They follow your behavior. Public money shapes the numbers. Story shapes the public money. That's the chain, all right? Everything we walk through today, the quarterbacks, the ringless teams, the long droughts, the selective pressure, that's the fuel that feeds it. If winning the Super Bowl was the only thing that mattered, every season would end with 31 failures. But it's not. It's not 31 failures every year, right? Some teams would be happy just to win a playoff game. Some teams would be happy to make it to the playoff. You know what I'm saying? Cowboys, everybody want a Super Bowl, but let's just keep it a buck. It ain't 31 failures every year. It's not 31 bad quarterbacks out there every year. Now, we got a couple of teams, couple of franchises that we could put just trash on them, label them trash. We ain't gonna do that here, but we all know who the teams are. But, fantasy football doesn't score rings. Betting tickets don't cash on a quarterback legacy, right? I told you guys a long time ago, we don't argue who's the best quarterback, who's the best team. It's fun. Not talking down on it. It's fun to do amongst your peers or whatever. But for football is money. Everything we trying to do is to cash some tickets in for you to help you win your week. And the biggest mistake people make is letting stories override the structure. And that's how you overdraft certainty. That's how you chase must-win spots. And that's how you build parlays that sound right but fall apart early. So this ain't about defending one quarterback or excusing one franchise's behavior. It's about understanding how the league actually operates and how money moves inside it. Because football is emotional, but money don't care how you feel. Money cares if you stay disciplined, if you separated the noise from the numbers, if you recognize when the market was being driven by stories instead of substance. That's what football is money is. We talk football, but we always bring it back to the monies. Because once you stop betting stories and start betting structure, the game looks totally different. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. But then again, guess I'll never understand why they don't understand. But if you get it, let me know you got it. In the comments, drop it. Signing off. I'm your host. They call me boss. Thank you for coming. This is Football is Money.
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to Football is Money. Find every episode and more at footballismoney.com.